Thank you for coming along. There's a few new faces here. Hands up, who's new? No, don't embarrass us. No. So tonight we're very pleased to have Mary McIntyre, who's come all the way over from Oxfordshire to see us. And she's going to be talking about history of women in astronomy, part 2. Worry a little bit, you didn't see part 1. Hopefully, I did send a note out with a recording on YouTube of part 1 for those that wanted to diligently catch up. And I think you've already seen part 1, haven't you? You've seen part 1, yeah. Which is why when we asked everyone, and everyone went, "Oh, I'm not sure which one to have," and Prue went, "Oh, and part 2." That's why we got part 2. So this is effectively our last. We have seasons which start in September all the way through to June, and then we holiday July and August. So this is our last of our season, although things don't really stop. The only things that stop is we just don't do monthly talks in July and in August. So you can go off on holiday knowing you're not missing anything, which is pretty good. How are we doing at the moment? We've got 108 members now. That's 4 up on the last time I stood here. So that's not so bad. And no one has run away in the last 4 weeks. So you've got Annie, who's effectively coordinating all of us in the coordination team. We've got Jade, who looks after the money. Jonathan just comes up with loads of ideas. Merrick is an amazing helper-outer, but he helps out on so many things. It's sort of like challenge for time, but hopefully I can woo you back into some of the outreach activities we've got over the summer. Mike is our resident engineer. You walk into his house, there's a lathe. You walk past a lathe as you go into his house. He's that kind of chap, can build anything. Prim, ideas lady, able to negotiate. She's like our quartermaster. She found us a planetarium up at the university. Now, that's how come we've got a mobile planetarium, because Prim went and talked to people at the university and said, "We're such nice people, give us one." So we have got a planetarium. And of course, myself just at the end there. See any of them in the street, please feel free to say hello. As well as any of your colleagues you see walking down. We've had some weird moments where we've had 3 or 4 Bath astronomers all suddenly in Southgate at the same time for some reason. We've not understood why, but that's been quite nice. But there's a lot of us out there, so there's a good chance that you'll see a few going around. So what have we actually been up to in June? It is June we just finished, isn't it? So we've been doing loads of outreach, schools, fates, and pop-ups just in the middle of nowhere. This isn't quite the middle of nowhere because it's at the Royal Crescent. So we set up the solar scopes out there, and we've recently sort of spent about, over £2,500 on our solar kit. We've got quite a lot of nighttime astronomy kits to actually use for outreach, hardly any solar. So what we've done is we've invested in some solar kit here. So that's all new here. And on this particular occasion, there were some more telescopes over here. So we've got loads of solar kit now that we can run these events, which means that people don't have to bring their own kit and risk their own kit. It's great doing it, but once you see little Johnny with his Mars bar covered fingers approaching your telescope, you tend to have kittens all of a sudden, and you get a bit shouty. But if it's the Society's telescope, you just ask them to wipe their fingers and you don't mind so much. So yeah, as a person who's had their telescope licked by someone who had chocolate bar in their mouth all over the eyepiece, yeah. So what else have we done? This is schools. So we've got little Roger here. So I'm trying to remember. This was, trying to remember which. I think this was Oakfield Academy in Frome. And again, we ran a solar day for them. So we took each of the years, and they came through an hour or 2-hour sessions, and we were there from 9 until about 3:30, 4 o'clock, because we even had the after school classes as well to do. And we were talking to, it was a middle school, so we had years 5, 6, 7, and 8 that we were running classes with classes for. So we were very busy that day. Roger was doing all the outside stuff. I was doing all the stuff, talking inside about Cecilia Payne-Gapochkin, who might, never know. I'm not sure if she's going to turn up in your talk. Maybe. So done solar day. So the summer solstice at the museum, just here. Telescopes out in the garden. So we had 3. So we had Tony, I think we had Jonathan, and the other Tony. We had 2 Tonys. For anyone that came into the museum a week ago, yeah, on the 21st. got to see the surface of the sun, what was going on, all kinds of crazy stuff, prominences, sunspots, whatever we could see. That's kind of good. And we did the pop-up. So on Sunday, we were out in front of the Theatre Royal in Bath with the solar telescopes. Rog here, he's photobombing everything here, Rog. And we had telescopes just low enough so everyone had to get into awkward poses to look through them. But we had, I think, 3 telescopes out there, and we were sort of there for 3 hours and absolutely solid with people coming up and visiting. So very rewarding. All in all, over the last month, we got probably several hundred people to see through scopes. If we actually add in the school as well, we're probably on about 300, 350 odd people have seen the sun who'd never seen the surface of the sun before. So lots of good work there. And of course, there's a bit of mucking around. Now, Prim doesn't like photos taken of her. Can anyone spot Prim here? Yeah, Roger is trying to cover her up, but we're going to have to get Roger a bigger shirt because we can actually see his belly button in that particular one. But this was our first fete that we had. So this was Bath Eastern Fete on Saturday, just gone. And we've got 2 fetes coming up this weekend as well. So we're interacting with all the people selling jams and flowers and all that kind of thing. We had the kayakers around here, but we're now actually, we got invited back to this one. So we're not actually having to promote ourselves. They're asking us to come back. Hinton asked us back, so that's Saturday. So we're getting a bit of a sort of a reputation now. We've been doing this for about 3 years or so, 3, maybe even 4 years. But we're now part of sort of the fabric of society or fabric of things. So we've already had Bathampton, who we always go to each year, and Wellow, they've also asked us back as well. So every time we go, we get asked back. So that's quite nice. I think it's mostly because we're crowd control on little children by firing rockets all over the place, which is the most encouraging bit. One for the diary. We've got a rather large, so this doesn't look, this is York Street. We're going to this side where the parking is, just beside Toppings, and opposite the offices of Bath Bid. We're going to have gazebos and telescopes along here. So there's actually a gap between this building. So hopefully we'll be able to see the sun if we have the telescopes around about here. But we'll be doing all kinds of stuff in terms of outreach alongside the museum here. So they'll have staff, and we'll also have the Herschel Society as well. So we did a pop-up shop last year, same date, that weekend of August, and they've asked us back. Their budgets has been cut, so they can't rent us a shop this time. So we're going to take this slot, and Toppings are going to be running a display of space books. So it's going to be effectively 4 groups all working together along York Street, just to promote sort of looking up in the sky and enjoying that. So please come along, save that date, Sunday the 13th of August. It would be great to see you. You don't have to help out. Seeing your face just brings a smile to our faces. The volunteers are great, but they do get knackered, but seeing a friendly face always cheers you up and puts a skip in your step. What else have we been up to? I'm not sure we've got any up here, but we've written this for the museum, a series of Caroline's almanacs. And there's 1 per season. The reason is visitors come here and actually there's nothing about astronomy or doing astronomy in the museum. And so we have these observing nights out the back and people walk away with nothing. So this is the new takeaway. So we try to keep it so it's it doesn't need to be refreshed too much. Effectively, they've just got 4 to run through the year, and then they can go back to the original season, just run through, and then we'll have a little insert because we don't do anything about planets in here because they're changing all the time. Okay, so there'll be a little insert that if the museum wants to pop it in for a particular event, which will talk specifically about what the planets are doing. But this is generally a little bit about facts about the night sky, but it's also linking into a little bit of Caroline and William Herschel. So things that they discovered, sort of pointed out, and how you can find them in the night sky as well. Okay, so we've done that. That took quite a lot of work, but we've just had summer's been printed, so autumn and winter have been printed. So it's just we're waiting for spring to come back from the printers, and the museum's got that. So it's co-branded. and it's got a link to join back into Bath Astronomers at the back as well. So to visit the museum or become a member of Bath Astronomers. So hopefully we'll start seeing people sort of coming in via that route, some interest. That'd be great. What outreach have we got happening? I said it was going to quieten down a bit. Well, not this week. Roger again and myself will be running a space camp at St Vigor and St John's primary school on Friday evening. So they're camping in the school, and we're going to be taking the planetarium to scare them with scary movies inside the planetarium. And hopefully if the cloud clears, then they'll be able to do a little bit of solar observing, because it won't be dark by the time we actually pack up and leave. But if we're really lucky, and we might get to see the moon on that particular visit. But year twos is actually all about the energy we convey rather than specifically the information or seeing stuff. Seeing a telescope is enough. Actually, seeing through it is actually not that necessary for year twos. And then we've got the two fates. On Saturday, we're at Hinton Charterhouse, the village fete on Millennium Green. That's a revisit. And then Odd Down Family Fun Day, actually Odd Down Sports Ground as well. And then we just set up our gazebo, telescopes and rocket launching, and we just see what happens. The Abbey's invited us back, so we'll be running solar upon the Abbey. So I'm after volunteers to carry telescopes, 212 steps to the top of the Abbey. Can't see any hands. Not sure why. You said you wanted to do some observing. And so we'll be doing that, and we'll have the planetarium downstairs as well. The reason we do that is we like to support the Abbey as well, but it's also they charge for that visit to the top of the Abbey, and we get a certain percentage of that, which goes into our funds to buy all that solar kit. So it's actually quite we're different from a lot of other clubs in that we've got potential for these revenue streams from these other commercial bodies that want to get us to provide services for them. So if we do that, then if you're a school or anything like that, unless you're a fee payer, whether the parents pay fees, all state funded schools, we do everything for free, other than a bit of an insurance charge for the planetarium. 12th of August will be at Marlborough. So they've asked us to run some planetarium sessions there. And then the following day, we've got that pop-up solar Sunday. So got a few things, but the rest of July is recovery. So we'll just have to see. But you never know. I propose we could start the stargazing on the 22nd of July. So that's the first date I'm going to put in. So it's going to be getting dark enough. And in fact, that is around the dates that we get official darkness back, although it's a gradual trend. And if you want to see this one, anyone know what this one is? It is a globular cluster. Do you know which one it is?
Not one from here.
It's Omega Centauri. You're not going to see it from Bath. It's a southern hemisphere one. But I thought, isn't it lovely? Bit of a tease. Yeah, this is what you're going to see on the 22nd of July, if you're lucky. No, I think that's got Omega Centauri. Yeah. So what we've got upcoming talks, we've got Dr. Becky Smethurst on the 27th, all the way through. Steve Warbis, gosh, which club is he from? Macclesfield. Yeah, so you mentioned him earlier on. I was going, oh, we've got him already. We've got Richard Hook, who will be talking about the large telescopes being built by the European Southern Observatory. Caroline Villeforth. I've got members night, so around about Christmas time, there'll be lots of hints and emails about, wouldn't you love to give a talk? So please, perhaps put your thinking caps on now. Perhaps if you've got a little project that you're planning to do, but maybe you're going to start it in the autumn, maybe you're not, have a think about our members night next year, because your project could feed directly into that. And then we've got in March, we've got Dr. Emma Curtis Lake returning to tell us about all the science that's been done by JWST over the last, by then it will be nearly, 2 years. It'll be over a year and a half of science. So she's just done one for Wells and Mendit. So there's a lot of stuff she was going through. Add another year, no idea, well, it's not quite a year, is it? Another 9 months, then I'm sure there's going to be loads to add in there. So I did mention Dr. Becky is going to talk to us in September, so that's when, but we're going to have a change of venue. We're going to the BLSI, which is up on Queen's Square. So we're renting a room up there, partly because we're going to run a competition with schools to actually come and meet Becky, because Becky is a YouTuber. She has got, as of today, 591,000 people following her, and her videos have been watched 63 million times. Quite a popular astronomer. She's based at Oxford, Christchurch, and she studies black holes. And she did actually win. Here's the link. She won one of the, I think, the third Caroline Herschel prizes, which was partly awarded by the Herschel Museum here, for promising development in sort of at the beginning of her career, her postdoc career. So looking forward to that, but there'll be lots of notes about don't go here, don't go to the museum, make sure you go to Brilsey instead. Okay, we haven't got the big room, we've just got the side room, but hopefully it means that everyone can feel comfortable coming along to that. So it'd be absolutely great to get a full house on that one. Okay, have I talked too long? I probably have. So I should hand over to Mary, who is going to talk us about the history of women in astronomy. Now, how do I know Mary? Well, you do a bit of outreach, and it doesn't matter what you try and do, Mary will already be there. She'll have her sketching set up. She'll be running workshops on sketching. I went home to my hometown of Guildford. That's where I was born and raised. That's where I first went to an astronomy club. I was wandering through the local mall there, the local sort of shopping area, and there was Mary running a sketching class. Now, nowhere near Oxfordshire. This is my hometown, but the Mary was there. And we've collaborated on, during COVID, something called Reach Out and Touch Space, which was loads of astronomers getting together and just doing something on YouTube, just to try and get people's spirits back up. And that's continued in a program, a YouTube thing that's available on Mondays at 8 o'clock. You can, what did I call it?
Space Oddities now.
It's Space Oddities.
Reach Out and Touch Space now.
Yeah, Space Oddities. So just go into YouTube, type Space Oddities in there, and then that will link you through. They kick off at 8 o'clock. Sometimes they run an hour, sometimes they run 2 hours. And Mary's a panelist on there. Yeah. And I've been known to be a panelist on there as well. And it's just amateurs talking about the astronomy they love, and occasionally they get guests in. So they had one of they've had astronauts on, they've had people, various contacts, because some of the panel members are actually based in the States, and they've got really good contacts with various people from JPL, NASA, and all that kind of thing. So they just basically invite their mates in who are currently building a rocket. Tell us about the rocket you're building. So it's quite a good experience. So you can come in on that. But Mary hinted there that she's very busy, and that's because she's doing so many things, other things. I know all her sketching. So she runs classes. She teaches people how to do really beautiful sketches of the moon, the craters of the moon, and various stellar objects, and really how, because when you think about it, there's certain techniques that you can use that actually suddenly flip what looks like a rough sketch suddenly into something you're very proud of. And I think Mary is very good at sort of getting you to that first step where you suddenly realize, I can do this. And her whole sort of mission appears to be getting people to that I can do this part. And so that's great with all the outreach she does. But it's not just all the sketching and all the craft things. Don't go anywhere near Oxfordshire around Halloween. She has the most amazing sort of costumes and makeup that she puts on. So I'm never going near her village around Halloween. It's scary. I've scared some people in here, but I'm sure if we brought your makeup in here on a Halloween night, we'd have some very, very scared children. Yeah, and you also do Comet Watch.
Yes, we're on a bit of a break, but yes, I'm
a
co-host of Comet Watch.
Yeah, so you were inspired as a young child, picking up those, like the Ladybird books that a lot of us picked up, and just like other people, other things get in the way. For me, it was girls. For you, it could have been boys or whatever. And life gets on, and then suddenly you rediscover astronomy. I rediscovered astronomy, you rediscovered astronomy, did GCSE astronomy, and then moved on. And then you actually found an astronomer to marry as well. Oh, an amateur astronomer to marry in Mark McIntyre, who's actually done a talk for us on the UK Meteor Network. I think, was that last year? It could have been last year. So I've waffled way too long. I'm going to swap over presentations now, get you all set up. I will give you the doofer and then I hand over to you. Okay.
An introduction. I know you guys, some of you at least saw part one of this, if not, the recording is available. And if you didn't see part one, the origin of this talk basically was when I was asked to write an article for the Yearbook of Astronomy about male mentors for women in astronomy, because women were not allowed to go to university to get an education. And when I started digging, I was assuming there'd be Caroline Herschel and then a couple of others. And whoa, no, there were so many that it ended up being a 3-part article for the yearbook. And so I decided to put them together into a talk, because these women are often not talked about. They've had their work credited to the wrong people. In my first talk, I went up to and including Caroline Herschel, and those of you who know me know that she is my favorite person throughout the entirety of history, and I did cry when I saw some of the things here today because it's my first visit here. So this is kind of going from part 2 onwards, which covers a period of history where some of you may have heard of some of these women. It doesn't mean that they were treated fairly, so I will talk about that. And as with the first talk, anything I'm talking about here is not coming from a position of feminism at all. I'm coming at this from, we want equality and we are still not there. And it certainly wasn't there for the women that I'm talking about in this talk. So this is Caroline. There is a copy of this painting elsewhere in this museum, and she was absolutely brilliant. Although she wasn't, in fact, the first female to be paid for working in science, she was the first high-profile woman to be paid for working in science, I think, and that she changed the landscape for a lot of women. She was so groundbreaking, and I wish she understood what an impact she's had on a lot of people's lives, because I don't think that she would have really took that on board. I love her, by the way, in case you hadn't noticed. Oh, we're going the wrong way. Oh, there we go. So the first lady I want to talk about after Caroline is Mary Somerville, Mary Fairfax Somerville. She was an incredibly intelligent lady who was born in 1780. And she was born in Jedburgh, but actually spent most of her childhood in Fife. And she knew from a young age that she wanted to pursue science. And her dad actually did believe that she should be allowed to go to school and actually be taught sciences. She was incredibly frustrated at the fact when she went to school, it was kind of expected that girls would learn needlework and singing, possibly a bit of poetry, absolutely nothing about maths or anything like that. She was so frustrated at that inequality with the education. Boys were taught Latin, which at the time was the language of science. So if you couldn't speak Latin, there's a lot of publications or books that you wouldn't have been able to read. Girls were taught to read, but only enough that they could read the Bible. Beyond that, not necessary, apparently. And she was furious about this. And she would have relatives visiting and oh, look at the state of your sampler. You need to send her to school to get better at needlework. And it's like, I don't want to do needlework. But that's what it was at the time. That is the sort of education level that most women got. She actually said that her turn for reading was so much disapproved of and thought it unjust. Women should have been given a desire for knowledge if it were wrong to acquire it. And that's really important. I think a lot of women in history were gaslighted into believing that they were not worthy of being educated in a lot of parts of the world. And they themselves were the ones that said, no, we can't go out observing at night. We've got the delicate female constitution. That's dangerous for us. Like, it's literally... And that is Elizabeth Brown's own words. And it's kind of crazy to me that people thought that way. So yeah, she was frustrated. She wanted to learn. And why was it wrong for her to do something that was not expected? She also resented the injustice of the world, denying privileges of education to females when they were lavishly bestowed on men. And that is also true. And this is what it was like back then. I think the people that succeeded in history had to be the feisty, bolshy ones. Otherwise, they were not going to get their voice heard. And unfortunately, that then breeds that men saying, oh, I'm a bolshy women in science. But if you wasn't that personality, you wasn't going to kind of get around any of it, really. She actually started to learn arithmetic and teach Latin to herself because she knew that she was going to have to be able to speak Latin. Some of the arithmetic she learned actually by listening to her brother's maths lessons, and her brother's maths tutor recommended a good algebra textbook for her. So she went and got it herself and actually taught herself. She was very lucky that her uncle, who was Dr. Thomas Somerville, actually believed that she should have been educated, and he helped her to get her Latin up to the sort of level that was needed. And he also encouraged her and actually made her aware of all the female scholars that had gone before her. So she knew that she wasn't the only female that was looking for a career in this field, which is very, very true. She ended up marrying Dr. William Somerville, and she actually had been married previously. Her first husband was not supportive of her academic work or of any of her kind of trying to educate herself. He was very kind of possessive and tried to repress that side of her. But when she married Dr. Somerville, he was way more encouraging, and she would have done it on her own, I think, but it was really nice that she did have an uncle that kind of was there for her, uncle, a husband that was there for her. She actually ended up being so good at maths that she became maths tutor to Ada Lovelace, which is incredible. We all know of Ada Lovelace. That's a name that's like a household name. How many people will remember Mary Somerville, who actually taught her? So yeah, amazing. Now, she was really passionate about astronomy, but she had a really amazing career within kind of a lot of STEM areas, but particularly became well known because Laplace's 5 volumes on algebra, funnily enough, were not that accessible to the general non-mathematician. She translated it into all 5 volumes into a language that normal people that didn't have a maths degree could understand. And this was amazing for somebody to be able to explain something that complex in a way that was understood by people that didn't have a maths degree was just so incredible. And it's a real skill to be able to do that. So that kind of was how she started to get famous, really. She has published so many books. She did stuff on astronomy, maths, geography, and also microscopy. I love microscopy, so I was really excited when I found that out about her. She actually did say she regretted writing the book on microscopy, and I'm like, that makes me sad because microscopy is awesome. So why not point it down at small things as well as up at big things in the distance? So she was a real polymath, an absolutely amazing lady. She, in 2017, was a picture of her was added to the Scottish £10 note. And this was her and Nan Shepherd, who was a poet, are the first 2 females ever to have appeared on a Scottish banknote. So that is pretty amazing. So hopefully more people will now know the name Mary Somerville because of this, because it's one of those names that I'm sure is not as well known as it really ought to be. Maria Mitchell, I briefly mentioned Maria Mitchell in my part 1, I think. She was born in a Quaker community in Nantucket, and her dad was actually a teacher and an amateur astronomer, and he educated all of his children, and their community in general really fostered this atmosphere of equality in all things, and that included education. So where she grew up and was taught, it was just kind of accepted that boys and girls would get the same kind of education. So it was really supportive career-wise and teaching-wise, which was really good. She opened her own girls' school in 1835, and boy, did she turn some heads, because in 1835 in America, education was segregated. And she allowed non-white pupils to come to her school, which was not the norm at all. Additionally, she also made people's heads explode because she actually took the women out at night to observe, despite it being dangerous to their delicate constitution. So this was very much against convention again, but she's like, no, we're going out, we're good. We can go out and look at stars, we can look through telescopes, it's all good. So she was absolutely amazing. Another lady that I would dearly love to meet. She always said of herself that she had a normal level of activity, but with extraordinary patience. And again, slightly demeaning her own achievements, I think. A lot of women definitely had extraordinary patience back then if you was going to succeed. But yeah, she definitely was a very patient lady. She did discover a comet in 1847, Miss Mitchell's comet, so she became a bit of a household name because of that. And she actually became the professor of astronomy at Vassar. She was the first professor in astronomy in the whole of the USA that was female. And she was also the director of the observatory, and she was teaching and doing research. Now, naturally, they were not going to pay her the same as they pay men. Most universities, even today, don't do that. As a side note, I don't know if you guys remember, was it last year on International Women's Day? Somebody had written a bot on Twitter. It was hilarious. It was like, get the popcorn and sit and watch Twitter kind of day, because all these institutions were celebrating their female academics. Oh, we're so proud of Becky Smethurst for doing black holes research, for example. She is amazing, by the way. You'll be very excited to meet her. So they were kind of doing this, but every university that did that had a gender disparity in pay, the bot would then retweet it and say, this university pays women 80% of the salary that men do. And it was so funny. They were all like, oh yeah, but no, but it's actually in the figures. You can go and look it up yourself. So it was hilarious. I don't know who wrote that bot, but it was wonderful. Anyway, she was paid way less than a man, but it's still absolutely amazing that they allowed her to become professor, because if you remember the story of Maria Winkelmann-Kirsch in part 1, she was working at the Berlin Academy of Sciences as her husband's assistant for free. When he died, they booted her out. They wouldn't even let her stay to work for somebody else. So it's amazing that Vassar were forward thinking enough to let this happen. She founded the Association for Advancement for Women, so she did a lot to promote education for women, which is awesome. And she does have a lunar crater named after her. There are only 1.6% of all lunar craters are named after women. So if any of the women I'm talking about tonight have one, I'm going to show you where it is. And Maria Mitchell's is actually on the near side. So if we look up here, it's that tiny little one there. But at least it's on the near side and not just on Venus, which a lot of them, so many are on the far side, but, a lot of them are on Venus and we're never going to see those. So, so she does have a crater, which I believe is that one.
St. Caroline's.
It is actually,
Nice.
outrageous. But at least hers is on a wrinkle ridge, so you can kind of find it. But so Elizabeth Brown is possibly a name that you also know. Her dad was a keen astronomer. There's a theme here. We're still relying on our dads to educate us, or our uncles, or a family friend, etc. Her dad was an amateur astronomer, but a really keen meteorologist, and he was meticulous with his weather recording. And Elizabeth worked with him. She is definitely the first woman to have ever been photographed in an observatory. So you can, that proud face, deserved, absolutely deserved. I remember how excited I was when we built our observatory. Then we realized we needed 2 because my husband and I cannot work together in there. But she's probably one of the first women to own an observatory, because even when women were being employed, like officially in observatories, a lot of times they were not allowed in the domes. They were not allowed near the telescopes. Can't trust women near those. They would use excuses like there are no ladies' toilets here. And it's like, dude, we can hang on for an hour, just let us look through the telescope. But so she was able to use her own telescopes because it was her own observatory. She did a lot of solar observing, and she was working with her dad. And when her dad became quite unwell, she took over like this meticulous weather recording that they did. And when her dad passed away, it kind of gave her a bit more freedom to do other things. So she began doing a lot of solar observations and then started eclipse chasing in 1887. We know that because of her observing notebooks. This is what I was talking about with gaslighting. So this is some of Elizabeth Brown's own words. First of all, many ladies have ample time at their disposal, probably true, and are skilled with the use of a pencil. So therefore we can put them to use drawing sunspots. That's okay. But she actually wrote down herself that the sun is a good subject for female studies because it can be done in the daytime and didn't mean exposure to the night air. Because the miasmas, they come and get the women only, apparently. I don't even know what a miasma is, but something that they believe was going to kill off all the ladies, obviously. So Elizabeth Brown wrote this herself, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I would not have done well in this period. I honestly would not have done well in this. I would have been burned as a witch or something by now. So this is some of her very meticulous sketches. Now, Elizabeth Brown actually partly founded the BAA, and there are loads of her amazing sketches on the BAA archive, and these are some of them. I love looking at historic astronomy sketches. Now, I mentioned that she became an eclipse chaser. Think about what you have to do when you're eclipse chasing. You basically get in a boat at this time, there's no planes. You're going to go off around in a sailing boat to some random location somewhere in the world. Tropical storms, horrendous waves. When you get there, there could be untold number of diseases. There could be some local political situation you find yourself in. There could be local uprisings. So much. Like, I'd be scared getting on a boat and sailing to some random island. But that was considered safer than women going out on nighttime in an English garden. Like, what is going on here? So crazy, unbelievably crazy. Like, yeah, I wouldn't go eclipse chasing to a tropical island now, let alone back then. No, absolutely crazy. So yeah, she co-founded the BAA, which allowed female members from the get-go, unlike the RAS, and also has had females on the section directors and on the kind of governing councils from the very beginning. So yeah, and the BAA are still working hard to actually put right some of the disparity with female male, kind of not as many females being members. They're doing a lot to try to correct that. Another amazing lady was Isis Pogson, Elizabeth Isis Pogson, but she was known as Isis. And her dad was the director of the Radcliffe Observatory in Oxford. So she was born not far from where I live now. I'm from Lancashire, but I live in Oxford. So her dad actually ended up in 1860 being appointed as the government superintendent of the Madras Observatory. So they moved away, her and some of her brothers, actually, they all upsticked and moved away so that he could do that job. And when her father passed away, unlike the Berlin Academy of Sciences that like to kick out their female members when their husband died, they actually gave her a job as director in place of her father. So absolutely amazing. So that's a picture of the Madras Observatory in India. So she was running that for a good number of years after her father passed away. So yeah, she was an amazing lady who was put forward to be a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society by her father and was turned down because she's female. There was actually a vote on this. I think I mentioned it in part one. They did a vote on this to see. She was obviously turned down. Obviously, there was no way they were going to allow it. But then they thought, let's ask the fellows whether they think we should allow women. So I'll let you guess what the outcome was of that vote. But one guy said this was practically an invitation to introduce a social element into the meetings. Let's put down a parquet floor and get a violinist and we shall dance our night through the papers. And it's like, dude, I'm not dancing with you if there is a dance. Like, what a brat, honestly. They did eventually in 1920 overturn that and women were allowed, and Caroline Herschel was one of the first women ever to be an honorary fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society. And then once they did allow women to be fellows, I think her and Mary Somerville were allowed, and Isis Pogson was one of the first to finally be allowed as well. Good, she absolutely deserved to be a fellow. Mary Proctor is a lady that was off my radar entirely, I'm ashamed to say. She was born in Ireland, but moved to Missouri in 1881. And that is actually a picture of her. Again, taught astronomy by her father because she couldn't go to university, and she helped him with observations and proofreading of his books and papers and all of that stuff. And together they founded a journal called Knowledge. And Mary kind of taught astronomy in private schools while she herself was trying to study at university. At a lower level, she had to get taught by her family, but once she was able to go to university, she was funding that education by teaching astronomy elsewhere. She later did have a career as an astronomy lecturer and became a very prolific writer and was very well known for her children's books on astronomy. And I think people referred to her as the children's astronomer, which if anyone called me that, I'd be so happy because you've got to get them young. It's really good. So yeah, she is known to have observed solar eclipses, and her solar work is the reason that I found out about her. And it's because of this sketch. I went to America in 2017 to photograph the solar eclipse. When I got back, I have lost count of how many hours I have spent trying to digitally combine all of my different exposures to create a lovely HDR photograph of the corona with blah, blah, blah. Absolute nightmare. I decided to just draw the damn thing because it was easier. So I drew it based on my photographs, and it's way better than my Photoshop version, by the way. And when I put that online, someone emailed me and said, this looks so much like Mary Proctor's sketch. And I was like, Mary who? So I can't remember who sent me that photograph, but I'm so glad they did, because there are so many striking similarities between these. Obviously mine's done in pastels, but what's really interesting is we've got the prominences, but also you'll notice that we've got like kind of ordered streamers and the corona. That means both of these were taken during solar minimum. And when you have solar minimum, the corona forms 2 or 3 kind of ordered streamers and then a bit of stuff around the outside. When we're at solar max, like now, where the sun's been doing all sorts of really awesome stuff, this would be a uniform mess all the way around, because these are linked to the sun's magnetic field. So whenever you see a sketch or a photograph of the corona where it's got ordered streamers, you know that it was done at solar minimum. But I digress again anyway. I'm so glad that I did this sketch and then became aware of Mary Proctor on the back of it. Mary Proctor also has a crater. And if we look, here is Tycho. And it's basically this one up here. So this big one here is Maginus, or Maginus. And it's this crater here. So it's actually a decent sized one. Unlike most of the female craters, are normally a bit rubbish, but yeah, great, really decent sized one. So Wilhelmina Patton Stevens Fleming, born in Dundee, but she moved to Boston with her husband when she was 21, and she ended up having a young child, and then her husband abandoned the pair of them, so she was left to fend for herself, and she had to look for work. And with her situation as it was, she ended up getting a job as a maid. Luckily for her, she got a maid job with Professor Edward Charles Pickering, who was the director of Harvard College Observatory. And he saw something in her from the get-go. He knew that she was a very smart lady. And he would often joke with his observatory staff, saying, my Scottish maid could do better. So in the end, he gave her a job at the observatory, beginning with kind of administrative, clerical kind of work. And then he trained her to be one of the founding members of the Harvard Computers. So that's quite a career shift from being a maid, but how amazing that she just landed in the right place for that. So basically for ages, I thought she was the first member of the Harvard Computers, but she wasn't. Henry Draper was a guy that had been working really hard on this kind of stellar classification spectroscopy catalog, the Draper catalog. And when he passed away, his widow wanted to help continue that work. And so she had been in touch with the Harvard College Observatory and Edward Pickering to try to get his team working on that. And the work originally began by Nettie Farrar. And Nettie Farrar, like so many women before her, got engaged. When you're engaged or married, not allowed to work anymore. You've got to be at home making babies. That's all that you're allowed to do. So basically she had to leave. So Wilhelmina was trained to kind of pick up that work. And I really like Edward Pickering because he gave so many women an opportunity to work in astronomy. But being a Harvard computer was not all it was cracked up to be, which I'll talk about in a second. But he did teach her to analyze these stellar spectra, and she became one of the Harvard computers. And the people in the university kind of called them Pickering's harem, which is so unkind, and like in today's money is just not kind at all. But basically, she helped to devise a new stellar classification system. Now, there is no doubt at all that Pickering believed in these women. He believed they could do the work, but he also knew they were cheap labor. So he primarily employed them because he knew this was a big job, and he knew that if he employed women, he could probably get 3 for the price of 2 working on this. That is ultimately what it came down to. So while I'm really happy these women did get to work in this scenario, it wasn't quite as rosy as people would have you believe. Fleming is on the lunar far side, but luckily Apollo 14 took loads of photographs, and this guy James Stubbe put loads of them on Wikimedia. So as all astrophotographers do, if you download a picture off the internet, the first thing you do is reprocess it yourself. So that's what I've done here. And we all have unique taste when it comes to that, but it's a decent crater. It's just not one that we're going to see from Earth ever, but it's really great that she has a crater. Now, another Harvard computer was Annie Jump Cannon, who is another name that I think is better well known. She was quite a bombastic personality, quite mischievous and always giggling. And again, somebody that I think I would really enjoy to go and have a drink with today. So she was born in Dover in Delaware. Her mother was her first astronomy teacher, and she actually encouraged Annie to pursue that career in astronomy. And in America, you was actually able to go and get an undergraduate degree in 1884. You couldn't do that yet in the UK. So she did graduate in 1884 and then started working as a Harvard computer. And she was then kind of looking at the spectra of over, well, nearly 250,000 stars and classifying them. So she took the original classification system that Wilhelmina Fleming had devised and redesigned it a little bit. None of the next people were happy with the previous person's system, so they were improving it all the time. So she went through a lot of spectra. Now, these were spectra that were photographed by the men during the night. Women were working in the day. There's no way they were going to let them do this at night because miasmas and stuff, obviously. But it's all work guided by men, photographs taken by men, the analysis guided by men. Absolutely no way of having any career development or promotion, but there's no doubt that they're doing amazing work here. I mean, to catalogue that many stars, honestly, I'd be just like, yeah, whatever, it looks a bit like that. I'd get bored very quickly with that, I think. Another lady was Antonia Maury. She was born in New York and was actually the niece of Henry Draper. So she ended up getting a job because of the family connection. And she studied at Vassar, actually was one of Maria Mitchell's pupils, which I think is awesome. And she graduated with honors in physics, astronomy, and philosophy. So very, very intelligent lady. And she started working as a Harvard computer, and she actually determined the orbit of the very first discovered spectroscopic binary star. So when we're talking about binary stars, a spectroscopic binary, you've got two stars orbiting each other, and they've both got slightly different spectra appearing depending where they are in orbit around each other. And she was able to actually, for the very first time, actually get the orbit of that determined. She then decided that the spectral classification system that the previous lady had worked on wasn't good enough for her either, so she went on and redesigned that one. But to be fair to her, the stellar classification system, the "oh, be a fine girl, kiss me" thing, that's not enough. There's not enough categories there, so you have to subcategorize each of those categories. So that's the kind of work that they were doing with the stellar spectrum. So absolutely amazing. So she also has a crater. It's tiny, but it's here. So we've got Hercules, Atlas, and Endymion up here, and these are wide field images of mine, by the way. That's why they look rubbish when you zoom in. But yeah, I think it's that one. It's kind of hard to tell. It's incredibly difficult to actually find these craters when you go online, because there's either an out of focus blob, or there's a really high-res picture taken by the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter with a high sun angle and no relief around the landscape. So I believe it's that one, based on reading many descriptions. So there was another lady that was working as a Harvard computer, and that was Henrietta Swan Leavitt. And she was born in Massachusetts and got her bachelor's degree in 1892. And she was actually working on magnitude of stars rather than spectra. So this was looking at photographic plates and figuring out how bright all of the stars were on these photographic plates. And they were trying to do that with pretty much the whole sky. So there was a lot of photographic plates coming in. And one thing that she discovered that is absolutely crucial in cosmology was the first discovery of the period luminosity relationship of Cepheid variables. What the heck does that mean? Well, Cepheid variables change in their brightness, and they do so in a given period. So it might be 8 days, it might be 8 hours. But she discovered that the variation was related to its real brightness. So that meant if you could look at one and figure out how many days or hours it took for it to vary, they would know exactly how bright it was. And if you knew what its real brightness was compared to what it looked like, you knew how far away it was. So they became standard candles. And this is where we start to really realize how big the universe is. And for cosmology, absolutely phenomenal work. And it's now called Leavitt's law, quite rightly so. And it's Leavitt's law is easier to say than period luminosity relationship of Cepheid variables. But of course, this work originally was signed off by Pickering because women were not allowed to log discoveries. It just wasn't etiquette at all. If you read it, it does state that it's her work. But this was a common problem with the Harvard computers. There is a book written called The Glass Ceiling, which implies that these women were smashing through this invisible glass ceiling that stops women from getting promoted to senior roles. That's not what was going on. The work they were doing was breaking the ceiling, but they themselves were half the time not even getting credited for this work. They had to fight to have stuff changed to say, no, that was me that did it. And women actually left this role over arguments to do with this because they were not being credited correctly. And, you know, Pickering was doing his best to make it better for them, but ultimately they had nowhere to go from this job. Maybe supervise a few other Harvard computers. That is as far as your career is ever going to go here. But it was still amazing work all the same. Crater Leavitt is on the far side again, but it's a pretty decent one and one I really must sketch at some point. I really like the look of that. It's got some nice shadows on it. So awesome. So here in the UK, we have Annie Scott Maunder. And Harvard was not the only place employing lady computers. The Greenwich Observatory started to do it as well. So in 1890, she became the first Greenwich computer. She was also the first woman in England to be paid to work in astronomy, excluding Caroline, obviously, because she was working in England, but paid by Denmark, I think. But yeah, she was one of the first people certainly to be paid for working at Greenwich, that's for certain. So yeah, what she was working on was working with her husband, Walter. They were looking at sunspots and they included them studying the giant sunspot of 1892. This sounds like there should be a disaster movie called The Giant Sunspot of 1892. It's incredibly hard to find out more information about that sunspot. But one of the things that they discovered was actually the 11-year solar cycle, which is actually a 22-year cycle, but in terms of activity, it waxes and wanes over an 11-year period, then the polarity switches and it does the same again. So they were actually responsible for discovering that. And, you know, when you ever hear people talking about the Maunder minimum, where the solar activity kind of wanes over the entire cycle, it's because of the work that Annie and Walter were actually doing. I actually got hold of a book of her husband's just recently that was published in 1917, and I got hold of an original copy. So excited. But yeah, she ended up becoming the editor of the BAA Journal in 1894, which was a paid position, so that was great. Yeah, when she left, I think it was 30 years or something after she left, until Greenwich actually employed another lady computer, but she was the first, and the women that do the first are always amazing. So Crater Maunder is technically on the lunar far side, but under favorable western libration, you can get a glimpse of it. It won't look like this. It'll look like a squished oval blob in the corner. So look for any squished oval blobs in the corner of the western libration zone. But again, it's a really beautiful crater with slump terraces, and one that I definitely want to sketch. I am intending to do a sketch of every single crater named after women. I will get to it if I ever find a free minute in my work schedule. So as I said, these lady computers did have great careers, and seeing women working in the observatories like this kind of again changed the landscape. But they were doing work assigned to them by the men. The discoveries were not necessarily attributed to them correctly. Some were, but many weren't. There were disputes over pay as well, disputes over crediting. There was absolutely nowhere to go in terms of career development, which I think is really bad. But where else can they go? It's just not accepted that women are going to take senior positions in most cases. So it was really difficult. Now, what really yanks my chains is that to do this job, particularly at Greenwich and probably at the Harvard College Observatory, to be a computer at the Royal Greenwich Observatory, you had to have got a degree. That came at a huge amount of money, cost-wise, so your family had to be wealthy, and that's fine, except that when men went to work as a computer at Greenwich, they came straight from school with no qualifications whatsoever. So if a 14-year-old boy with no qualifications can be trained to do the job, why did the women have to have a degree first? Doesn't make sense to me. And this would have been a really costly thing, and finding a university that would even accept women and let them graduate, you know, it really annoys me, that disparity with the recommended qualifications. It's like, how is that fair? It was 40 years until another lady computer was employed at Greenwich after Annie Maunder left, which is really quite shocking. So yeah. Now, women could start to get an undergraduate education. First of all, when Bedford College for Women at the University of London was founded in 1849 by Elizabeth Jesser Reed, I should say. And then St Hilda's College, Lady Margaret Hall in Oxford was founded in 1878. So women could go to these universities at a huge amount of money, cost-wise, and get a degree, except they're not actually going to get a degree because they were not allowed to graduate until the 1920. So for 40 years or more, women were paying to have a degree, and at the end of it, not actually graduating. But the women didn't care. They wanted the education. They wanted the knowledge. They were happy to do it. But how wrong is this? And this is actually happening this year to both of my stepchildren because of the marking boycott. They're both having graduation ceremonies when they haven't got a degree yet because it hasn't been marked. So it's really great to see that we've moved on in 2023 compared to 1920. But yeah, I think this is so bad that women couldn't graduate until then. And even then, not at all universities either. Just shocking, honestly. Dorothea Clumke Roberts, meanwhile in Paris, women in our country couldn't even get an undergrad degree, but Dorothea Clumke Roberts was the first woman to be awarded a doctorate in astronomy, and that was in 1893. So amazing. University of Paris, way more forward thinking than London, obviously. Cambridge University did not allow women to take a degree until 1948. Even worse, my husband went to Oxford University. He went to Queen's College. When I was 8 years old, I would not have been allowed at Queen's College to do a degree because I was female. That is 4 years after the Sex Discrimination Act was passed that they finally allowed women to study in their college. So bad. It's like, how did they get away with it for 4 years? And apparently, with Mark was there 3 years after they first brought this in, 2 or 3 years, and it was already more than 50% women by then. They really had an influx of women. But I would just boycott that college out of principle, even now, even though I didn't go there. I'm like, well, if you wouldn't have taught me when you're 8, you're not having me now. And they wouldn't have wept because I'm not an Oxford graduate, but there you go. Now, another lady I want to tell you about is Adelaide Ames. She worked with the Harlow Shapley catalogue. She was cataloguing galaxies in the Coma and Virgo cluster, looking at galaxies that were brighter than 13th magnitude and just trying to catalogue all of these galaxies. That was probably the limiting magnitude of their equipment. So in 1931, her finished catalogue, that was the Shapley Ames catalogue, had, they didn't just catalogue galaxies, they were looking at that, but they were also looking at other objects. So this catalogue had 2,800 objects in it, and of those 1,250 were galaxies. So she was working doing that, and they were kind of getting this idea that galaxies were clustering, because again, this was something that wasn't really known at the time. Unfortunately, she died quite young, but the work that she did initially was really very important in looking for the evidence of this clustering, because we had no idea at this point that galaxies would form in clusters like they do, in superclusters and all that stuff. She died after a boating accident in 1932, so it's really sad that she didn't get an opportunity to have much more of a career than that. But the work she did do producing that catalogue was very, very important. Cecilia Payne-Gaposchkin was very good friends with Adelaide, and she was born in 1900, and she was born in Wendover in Buckinghamshire, and they moved to London when she was 12, and she wasn't allowed to study maths or science at the school that she went to. So she was originally kind of got moved there, went to St Mary's College, couldn't get taught what she wanted to. So she ended up moving to a different school that would actually teach her the subjects that she wanted to learn. She moved to St Paul's Girls' School and was able to study physics there, and was an absolutely amazing scientist. She got a scholarship to Cambridge University. They don't hand those out easily, so that's amazing. And she went to, at this time she's mostly focusing on physics, but she went to a lecture by Arthur Eddington talking about his eclipse expedition, and that sparked the astronomy interest. So that's when she started to pursue that. And she went on to do her degree at Cambridge, but obviously wasn't allowed to graduate because, gosh, no, we can't have that. But was actually able to move to the USA so that she could be a student on the Pickering Fellowship and get a position as an undergraduate to study, to get a PhD. They described her as one of the most capable go-getters, and I have no idea if that's a good thing or not. I don't know what that even means, but she was very gifted and very much like ready to get out there and have a great career. So she was still working with Harlow Shapley's group there. She was the first person to actually get a PhD in astronomy at the Radcliffe College in the USA. In her thesis, for the very first time, she related stellar spectral classes to temperature. And she also realized that based on her research, the sun must be composed of 99% hydrogen. Until that point, everybody believed the sun was made of the same stuff that Earth was, so they didn't believe this. When she handed in her thesis, one of the examiners said it was probably the best written astronomy thesis that he'd ever seen. But one of the examiners, Henry Norris Russell, said to her that she would basically be a laughingstock if she kept this conclusion in there. So he made her take that out because it went against the general belief. So you can guess what happened next. A few years later, he said, oh, look, I've discovered that the sun's made of hydrogen. And so he very briefly mentioned Cecilia's earlier work, but basically he just stole that entire discovery. And so many people don't know that Cecilia Payne is the one that made that connection. She ended up leaving that field of work because she knew that she was never going to get credited correctly. So she ended up moving on to study all of the stars that were brighter than 10th magnitude, so she could try to figure out the structure of the Milky Way. So she was still working kind of in that field, but in a slightly different sidestepped area so that she wasn't going to get stamped all over by the other guys. She surveyed over 2 million variable stars with her husband, Sergei Gaposchkin. I can't even begin to comprehend surveying that many stars. So yeah, she went on to do some pretty amazing work. Women were still barred from becoming professors at Harvard Observatory. So she was actually stuck doing very low paid research jobs. So not all of the US were kind of on board with having females doing professorships and such like. So she was kind of stuck doing that, but she also published a lot of books, which is amazing. Then finally at Harvard College appointed her the first female professor in 1956. And then she became the first female head of the department. And this was a massive turning point for Harvard. This is when they finally got with the program and realized women can do this job, let them do it. And it made Harvard appealing to other amazing women scientists to go there. So that was a really important turning point in their history. So amazing for her. Slightly more modern, I still think of that, even though she was born in 1922, was Margarita Hack. And then this is a lady that I would dearly love to have met as well. Boy, she was a feisty one. She was awesome. She was an Italian astrophysicist, and she worked a lot on stellar spectra with Otto Struve. And she had zero tolerance on anything that was kind of religious or woo-woo or anything that was superstitious. She was absolutely not into it at all and would absolutely say so. She almost didn't graduate because she went on a a protest march and got arrested. And luckily for her, war broke out, and it meant that no one did exams that year, not just her. So she did go on to graduate, and she became the first female professor in Italy and also the first female director of an observatory. So she went to this observatory that was a little known small observatory, and she transformed it over a number of years into a huge modern research center with worldwide collaborations with scientists from lots of different places. So she was amazing. I wrote a short article on her for the yearbook, and yeah, what an amazing lady. Feisty. Vera Rubin, a name I'm sure you guys have heard of. She was born in 1928, and she started observing age 10 when her and her dad made a telescope at home, and she started studying the Milky Way with it. She graduated. She was the only astronomy graduate at Vassar that year, which is disappointing given that they were allowing women to graduate. But in 1948, she was the only lady. She was barred from a graduate place at Princeton because she was female. Oh God. But she did end up going to Cornell and earned a master's degree in 1951. Oh, I said that posh. It's masters where I come from. If my dad heard me say masters, I'd never live it down. So yeah, she did go on and get a master's degree from Cornell. She made the first observations of galaxies that were deviating from the Hubble flow, and this was showing evidence of these galactic superclusters and the fact that not all galaxies are moving away at the rate that the universe is expanding. So although most things are going outwards, there are localized gravitational differences that mean galaxies do their own thing sometimes in these clusters. So she was one of the people that first found evidence for this. So this is incredibly important work. She also studied galactic rotation curves, and this provided evidence for dark matter. So this is really still very topical today. And I don't think we're really any closer to knowing what dark matter is, but you know, we're pretty much certain it must be there. She was a massive advocate for women in astronomy and just provided mentorships to so many women that she saw that needed some help getting them through the system. She got so many honors during her career, but the Large Synaptic Survey Telescope, which they started building in 2015, has now been renamed the Vera Rubin Observatory. Get yourself strapped in, because when this goes live, we are going to increase the number of dwarf planets, comets, asteroids by probably a factor of 100, because this thing's going to see down to mag plus 26, assuming that the satellite superclusters don't absolutely trash all their data, which is predicted to currently. The way that the Starlink and the other kind of constellations are looking to expand, a third of all their data is going to be trashed. Because if we as astrophotographers now take a picture of noctilucent clouds and a satellite goes through, it's a faint line. If you're looking at something that's mag plus 26 and a mag 3 satellite goes through, it doesn't just leave a line, it will blow out all of the pixels in that entire area. But yeah, this is a phenomenal construction. So this is an artist's impression. So it's going to have a mirror diameter of 8.4 meters. What would the Herschels have thought of that? I mean, honestly, it's 3.2 gigapixel CCD. It's going to be producing petabytes of data. Very exciting. It's going to be able to do the whole sky kind of in about 4 nights, I believe. It's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be utterly phenomenal. And there are going to be so many citizen science projects because there are not enough humans working in observatories to possibly crunch all that data. So exciting, exciting times. Now, I can't talk about women in astronomy in the slightly more recent times without talking about Caroline Shoemaker. She's another one of my absolute favorite people. And one of the reasons I love her story is that she didn't really have any interest in science or astronomy, but when her children grew up and moved away, she had a bit of empty nest syndrome. She was married to the planetary geologist Eugene Shoemaker. And basically, he had a way of explaining planetary geology to her that kind of made her a bit excited about it. When she had a bit of time on her hands and wanted something to do, she went and started working for him, just doing a little bit of stuff here and there. But that kind of evolved, and she began working at the California Institute for Technology and Palomar, searching for Earth-crossing asteroids and comets. So what they would do is take a couple of pictures at a set time apart, then put both of the plates into a spectrogram, so one on each side. And if you have the knack, when you look down there, anything that is moved, like an asteroid would or a comet would, it kind of floats in the mid distance. Not everyone's very good at it, but she was phenomenal at it. She could look at stuff, yeah, got it, look at it, yeah, that there's one there, whatever. And she just discovered so many things. And they were primarily interested in Earth safety, looking for stuff that was going to potentially impact Earth. So she also started working as a research professor at Northern Arizona University, concentrating on comets and planet crossing asteroids. And that is what led her to the discovery that probably made the Shoemaker a household name. So Eugene and Caroline were working with David Levy, and if you know anything about comets, you'll know David Levy, and they discovered comet Shoemaker-Levy 9. That is the comet that impacted Jupiter in 1994. So she was looking at this like, there's lots of things in the floating here that there can't possibly be a chain of asteroids. Realized it must have been a comet that has in some way been dissociated, and then they did the maths and realized it was going to hit Jupiter. Then all eyes were on the Shoemakers and David Levy, and what an amazing mind-focusing event this was, because this proved that comets can and will hit planets, so we need to be invested in near-Earth object stuff. So absolutely awesome. She and Jean were involved in a really bad car accident and her husband sadly was killed, but Carolyn continued to work with David Levy throughout the rest of her career. She co-discovered 32 comets and over 800 asteroids, and at one time held the record for the most comet discoveries and was in the top 3 for other discoveries. Obviously, with modern technology moving on, other people have now surpassed that, but what an amazing thing. I was lucky enough to interview her on Comet Watch, and I have never been such a gibbering emotional wreck in my life as I was having spoken to her. She was like 92 at the time. I spoke to her about 3 months before she passed away, and she came on the phone, on Skype, and she was so lovely to talk to. And even now, when I listen back to that episode of Comet Watch on YouTube, I still cry. Like, I cry a lot. You probably got that about it, but it was so amazing to speak to this living legend. You know, I'm so honored that I had the chance to talk to her when I did. So she got an honorary doctorate despite having never done any kind of scientific studying in her life. And what just a champion for having a career change later in life and being able to own it and become world leading at it. It just really inspires people. Now, Jocelyn Bell Burnell, you will all know that name, I'm certain. She was born in Northern Ireland, and her dad was an architect who designed the Armagh Planetarium. And the staff at the planetarium realized that she was really into astronomy and encouraged her to study that. But at school in Northern Ireland, girls were taught how to be wives. Nothing else. Wives and mothers, that's all that was expected of you. Lots of children, not much else. She didn't want that. It was really difficult for her to actually get anybody to take her seriously. And she ended up failing the 11 plus originally. So she ended up going to a different school and ended up getting a place at Glasgow University. She was the only female in the honours physics undergraduate class, and Glasgow University had a tradition that every time a female walked into a lecture room, they would wolf whistle, cat call, stamp their feet, bang their desks. It was an incredibly demeaning experience. So all the women undergraduates would huddle together and go in en masse, so they didn't have to be humiliated individually. She didn't have that option. Everybody assumed she would leave, but she didn't. She knew what she wanted to do and she went for it. She went on and did a PhD at Cambridge. She designed and built the radio telescope array to look at quasars. And then in 1967, on the 28th of November, she noticed a little bit of like noisy squiggle on the trace. She went back, this was all on paper, meters and meters and meters of paper. She took 3 months looking back on this trace, and she must have gone through like 200 meters studying the traces carefully, and discovered that this little scribbly thing repeated at regular intervals. This was the first time a pulsar had ever been discovered, which is incredible. This earned a Nobel Prize. Jocelyn Bell Burnell did not get the Nobel Prize. Her supervisor, Anthony Norris, got it. But whenever you ask her about this, she actually said at the time she believed it would demean Nobel Prizes if they were awarded to research students, except in very exceptional cases. And she didn't believe that that was one of them. It's really interesting. I've met Jocelyn Bell Burnell a couple of times, and she's another lady that is always kind of not, she doesn't self-deprecate as such, but she always says, my career is nowhere as illustrious as people make it out to be. And it's true in a sense, because her husband, for his job, had to move around a lot. So she had lots of jobs teaching here, doing that. So she didn't go to an institution and work her way up and become kind of like head of something. But she's still gone on and had an incredible career. And she also said about this, if I'd won the Nobel Prize then, nobody would have ever given me any other prizes, because who's going to give me a prize when I've got a Nobel Prize? So she's always been very glad that she didn't get it. She's worked as a lecturer and researcher in lots of universities and has had many, many awards during her career. So much love for this lady. Then just when you think you can't love her anymore, in 2018, she was awarded the Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics for the pulsar's discovery. She used the entirety of that prize money to set up the Bell Burnell Scholarship to help females from underrepresented groups and refugee students to become research physicists. I mean, how incredible is that? I mean, she's just phenomenal. And she's kind of not scary, but she's very quiet and understated, but you know there's more going on below the surface. She is so brilliant. She's incredibly brilliant, and her talks are just wonderful. I really love her. She was also involved in setting up the Athena Swan Awards, and this was when her and some other female academics were trying to address this gender disparity. So rather than having positive discrimination in that we've got a position only women can apply, which leads to resentment, and you never know if you've got the job on your merit and rather because they're ticking a box. So what they did instead is Athena Swan Awards rated your department based on female friendliness. So all the men that were leading departments got competitive about how female friendly it was there. So it actually had a really positive impact. And you had to have achieved at least a silver Athena Swan Award in order to apply for certain grants, which was amazing. Then last year, the government quietly overturned that. So now you don't have to have an Athena Swan medal. And it's like, just, She was also heavily involved in the Let Toys Be Toys campaign. Go and look that up. It's horrifying when you read the research they did before this. Basically getting rid of gender stereotyping on toys. So anything remotely scientific or learning was labeled in the boys aisle and dolls in the girls aisle. Toys are toys, let anyone play with them. Why do pajamas for an age 3 person, if they've got rockets on them, say boys? When you're 3, you're the same shape. Anyone can wear them. So there's still a bit of it, but they've definitely addressed a lot of that. They've made a huge difference to the toys thing, in particular, getting rid of that stereotyping. Because if that stereotyping is reinforced from a young age, it will be there in adulthood as well. And girls don't feel worthy of doing a lot of the jobs or applying for things anymore. So she's done a lot of amazing, amazing work. She is quite a brilliant, brilliant lady. I was on the same speaker conference as her in December, and I was like, please go home before I do my talk. I can't get up and do a talk in front of Jocelyn Bell Burnell. And she did have to leave, thankfully. I was like, phew. I'm sure it'd have been fine, but no, it was just like one of those moments. It's just like, what has happened to my life here? What is going on? It was just amazing. So the last time I looked on the IAU page, the data was still on looking at 2021. We've improved. So in 2020, we were down at 11%. So we have improved. So the IAU is the body that people tend to join when they are a professional astronomer. What's interesting, if you look at it by age, this can tell you 2 things. So you've got to be careful when you look at data like this, especially when some of the groups are small numbers. This could tell you that there are more opportunities now being awarded to younger women that are coming through. And that is true. There are way more PhD students that are women and whatever. There's a lot more of that going on. So yeah, that's true. But does it also mean that when we get to here, women are not being promoted, therefore they leave astronomy? The glass ceiling may very well still be here, and women are not able to get jobs in senior roles in academia, because at the lower levels, things are doing better. At the higher levels, they're not. And see, if you look at senior positions within physics and maths and astronomy, there is still a huge disparity. So this is like, hopefully this is good. By the time these people get to here, we hope we're doing better. But yeah, seeing this looks positive, but there could be another spin on it. So yeah, we still do definitely need to do better. So really my message is, like, you guys are one of the best societies I know of for your outreach work, honestly. Any of you that see a young female that's showing any kind of interest in astronomy, just help them. And if you are a female yourself, I know lots of female amateur astronomers, you get asked to do stuff for beavers getting their space badge, and they say no because they don't feel they've got the knowledge. You have more knowledge than a beaver doing their space badge, and all it takes is for one of those girls to see a woman standing at the front. Even if you're an amateur astronomer, they see you as this astronomer. If they see you at the front talking about this stuff or teaching you how to draw, then they're going to feel inspired, even if you yourself don't believe you have the skills. So just be there for the younger generation, particularly the young girls, because we still need to help them. I do a lot of sketching workshops, which is great. And this was a one-to-one that I did. This was another one of those moments where I was like, this lady contacted me. My daughter's making a poster about you for a GCSE art. And I was like, sorry, what? Why? She'd been to my talk that Jocelyn Bell Burnell was at, and she'd seen my lunar sketches, and their art thing was locked. So she's gone for tidally locked and is doing moon sketches for it. So I gave her a private lesson on how to draw the moon. So yeah, you just don't know who you're reaching. That's the thing. Her mum reached out to me, but if she hadn't, this girl would have been inspired by me doing a talk on women in astronomy, but showing one slide with a moon sketch on it. And it's inspired this lady. So half the time you have no idea who you've inspired. So please just keep doing what you guys are doing, because it's so, so important. If any of you have any moments left where you're not helping Bath astronomers, the IAU have got this global outreach project to try to help women and girls as well. This tweet really resonated. We still have a lot of gender stereotyping going on with regards to your role in the home. And there is an entire generation of women who are drowning because we've been raised with traditional gender roles, but also empowered to be independent. We're taking on the majority of household duties while simultaneously killing it in the workplace. We are tired. And yeah, that is true. We all need to, a lot of the female astronomers that are big names, their husbands have had to give up work to be a house husband, because it's hard to do this when you have a family. So yeah, it's important that we all just try to do more to support our spouses in whatever they're up to. This book is awesome. Most books about women in astronomy are written by somebody that has a narrative they want to spin, and they twist the evidence around a little bit. I've read books on Caroline Herschel, and then I've read Caroline's memoirs. I'm like, she didn't say that at all. Like, they've just twisted stuff. This is written by women, and it's amazing because there's lots of short stories of their career. There are places where you want to punch people for sure, but there's also a lot of positive in it, where there are male colleagues that have done everything they can to help and just encourage and pull all the strings needed to get women up and on their career path. So it's really good because it is written by the women themselves, and there's no other book out there that's like that as far as I know. So have you? It's so good. And I'm ashamed to say that the majority of the women in it I'd not heard of, and I should have. So yeah, so I'll stop talking. I've been talking for ages. Sorry. Any questions? Still silences scare me at the end of the talk.
Oh, we've got questions.
Mary, I've got a couple of useless facts for you if I can tell you about them. Really exciting talk. I really enjoyed that. Thank you very much. Talking about Mary Somerville, she used to live in Burnt Island in Fife. and I lived just across the road from where she used to live, obviously many years apart. I remember the blue sign being in the wall and saying Mary Fairfax Somerville. So I can all remember that over the years that that's where she lived. And obviously she was a mathematician, astronomer, understood all that. A few years later, I was doing a pub quiz, and we were tied in the quiz, and with a question to answer at the very, very end to see who won an Easter egg or a pint of cider or something like that. It wasn't anything terribly exciting. But anyway, the question was, who was the famous Scottish astronomer and mathematician, would you believe? And I was the only one that knew the answer, so there you go.
Isn't it shocking that you was the only one though? I mean, it's great you got an Easter egg, that's the dream. But...
Well, exactly, because nobody else knew, and they're all looking at each other saying, who? Who's never heard of her? And I said, well, yeah, she lived across the road from me. Couple of useless facts for you, there you go.
Amazing, thank you. What Easter egg was it, by the way? I'm intrigued. I love
I think it was a Cadbury's cream egg, if I remember right.
Oh,
Absolute heaven.
yes.
Yeah, thanks, Mary. That was great. Yeah, it was great to learn about some of the origins of those moon craters. Were any of those named during the lifetime of the women? Did they know they were being recognised like that, or was it all much later than they?
I actually don't know the answer to that. I honestly don't know. I suspect later for most of them, because it really wasn't convention for women to have anything named. So certainly, I don't think like Caroline Herschel's crater was named in her lifetime, for example. I don't even know when they first started naming them, to be honest. But I suspect a lot of them were after the fact, where there's been kind of campaigns, because they'd all been named for men by that point. There were hardly any left. So it's like, okay, we'll dish out what's left for some women then. So yeah, I don't even know who names craters. Is it the IAU? IAU. Yes, thank you. That will be in.
Yeah, thank you.
Brian Jones is also, who writes the yearbook of astronomy now, has also got a book coming out really soon called Who's Who on the Moon. And he's got like these things that he puts on Facebook all the time, every day. This is the anniversary of the birth of blah, 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 and like list their biography. And there's a book coming out that is all of the lunar crater named craters with their biographies and a picture of it and quite a few of my sketches of them as well. So I'm looking forward to that, because there'll probably be more information like that about that. So.
Thank you, Mary. That was a wonderful talk. And it's always, I always find it inspiring, and especially I found it with your last one as well, that there's always somebody in there that finds astronomy later in life, which is quite nice for, I mean, some of us have been in love with astronomy since we were very young, but then have kind of gone in and out of it. And it's just really nice to know that it's never too late. I just wondered, a lot of those astronomers kind of overlapped. Do you know if any of them inspired each other, if they inspired each other, if there's any evidence of that?
They definitely did. I mean, like Ada Lovelace studied under Maria Mitchell. I think I know Caroline Herschel certainly conversed with some of the ones that were famous at the time as well. I think they were definitely talking to each other and writing to each other and seeing each other at events. And yeah, I mean, it must have been amazing to meet another one. I mean, for the Harvard computers, you're working with them day in, day out. But
Yeah.
for the other people that were more kind of working alone, it must have been so important for them to make those connections. So yeah, it would have been, I'm certain they were writing to each other. So I know some of them definitely were, but I'm sure a lot of others were. And especially as well, where you've got people that are being mentored to a lot of up and coming people, there's going to be like a whole network that's going on. It'll be a bit like a Facebook group, you know, but no WhatsApp group, but without mobiles.
Yeah. I mean, it was wonderful that a lot of them, so many, were encouraged by men, but like you said, it was just sad that quite often they were just using them as cheap labor in some circumstances, I guess.
Yeah,
Not so much with fathers.
I'm so torn with Pickering, because his heart was in the right place, and also the guy that was employing the computers at Greenwich was working really hard to improve it for them, because they were paid a pittance for that work. And some of the eminent astronomers in England at the time were approached by Greenwich Observatory to come and be a computer. They were like, no, why would I take a pay cut to come and do this work that isn't actually that necessarily taxing, because you didn't need a degree to be able to do it. You just learn how to classify stuff that, yeah, that's that, that's that. I'm not saying it's easy work, but it's trainable. So yeah, I think people were trying to make it better, but ultimately it was cheap labor and they didn't really want the women to succeed beyond that. And it makes me so sad. What could these women have achieved if they'd had that opportunity? Where would they have gone next, you know?
Indeed.
Yeah, it's really sad. But at least their names are being talked about now. It's not all just like Pickering's work. It wasn't just this work.
Fantastic.
I think a couple of them were deaf as well. I think they had hearing impairment.
Wilhelmina.
Yeah, William Clement, but it wasn't. I'm sure Henrietta Swan Leavitt may have had some hearing loss as well.
And Cecilia Payne-Gaposchin actually went and she had Henrietta's desk after she passed away.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. That was really fantastic. I was wondering, do we know how they juggled work-life balance? Did they have children? And if so, how did they juggle that between their work and the family life, given?
Well, if they were wealthy, they would have had help, probably. They would have had nannies, or no, some of them didn't. I mean, I know Annie Jump, no, not Annie Jump. Maybe it was Annie Juncan. I can't remember. One of them never married at all. She was just quite happy as she was. A lot of them had husbands that were very supportive, and therefore they would together do lots of stuff to, you know, try to encourage them doing the job as well as being married. But yeah, there would have been help around for them, I'm sure, like relatives or help in the home. Like if you was wealthy, you could afford to have staff to help with that. But yeah, it must have been really difficult to juggle that back then. It's hard to do now. It's childcare is one of the limiting factors for women going back to work after having a family and getting back into a senior role, because there are no childcare facilities available, and if they are, they cost more than their monthly salary.
Yeah.
So people are having to take a backward step in their career just to be able to afford to work. And that is one of the biggest factors. So it must have been an issue back then as well. But it's a lot of these women must have had wealthy families behind them to have afforded the education in the first place. So, you know, I don't know if there's much written about that. It's not something I've read a lot about, but yeah, I imagine they would have had to have help. I mean, yeah, you're not going to get a male employer kind of, oh yeah, sorry, it's school run time, I'll be back in an hour. They're just not going to be into that, are they?
No, not at all.
Cecilia Payne-Gaposchin brought her children to the observatory when Shapley went absolutely mad because it was annoying everyone in the observatory. These kids just having this amazing playground, running around and destroying slides and sort of going down into all the libraries and just rooting around in everything and just being completely sort of tearaways. She said, well, I can't afford a maid to look after them because of the man we pay me.
Good
Somehow, she
Good
got a maid
for her.
then. She had a pay increase, and so that the children didn't have to
That's
go.
a great tactic.
I wonder, it might be in the book downstairs or possibly reflected on that slide slightly earlier, so forgive me, but I wonder, obviously beyond academia and the research institutions and the observatories, I wonder what the feel now is within industry, sort of growing UK space industry, satellite industry and the like, whether they're still getting the same problems, but within industry now.
It's getting better for sure. I mean, my husband, although he's got 2 physics degrees, he's worked in banking his whole career and he's a coder. And 10 years ago, there were no women coding on his team, or in the whole department, in fact, whereas now it's about 50-50. Sometimes they have new people and it's actually 60-40 in favor of women. And certainly within the space sector, I am seeing way more females that are involved in that side of things. There's been such a huge push to get girls into STEM subjects, and STEAM, art, is really important in all of this, because you can't be an engineer if you don't know how to draw something. So, you know, it's all fits together. So there's definitely been an improvement kind of lower down. But one thing that I see online is not so much within the workplace, but on social media, the amount of hate that a lot of prominent female scientists get online is shocking. And it was like the thing with the phosphine. Do you remember when they thought They didn't say, we've discovered phosphine, it means there's life here. What they actually said, we've gone public with this, we're not sure what it is, it could be an atmospheric natural thing that we're not aware of. Can other people please look at our research? Instantly, everyone's piling on them. You're so incompetent, women shouldn't be allowed to do this, you're claiming blah, blah, blah. And it's all, they didn't say any of those things. And then somebody sent out an email that allegedly came from the IAU, which was unbelievably sexist and rude. And then they claimed it didn't come from them. It was a member of staff that had an axe to grind. It's like, no, you're covering your backs because you've been called out on this. So, and it's kind of like, how is that making women feel welcome in the field? And I see it with, like, there's an amazing space artist called Catherine Macon. She sometimes shares screenshots of her inbox, not suitable for work. Honestly, it is vile. The messages that she gets are vile. And there's a lot of hate online for women that are in this sector. And I've been quite lucky. I get more disability hate than I do hate about being a woman that does astronomy. I get a lot of that, but I'm big enough to deal with that.
It's really hard.
It's really
That sword, isn't it? Because you need that social media platform, because that's the world we live in. And you know, to get following or to get your work published, but as you say, it really is a double-edged sword, isn't it?
It is, and in academia as well, there's been a lot of stuff about sexual harassment, and it seems that one of the key factors in whether you go on to have a successful academic career is whether your supervisor is a lech that's trying to hit on you all the time or not. And it genuinely is. That's what it comes down to. Oh yeah, I'm going to a conference, I want you to come with me. And then 5 minutes later, he's got a hand up your skirt in the elevator. And if you kick him off, like, no, I'm not interested, that's it. You don't get invited to anything, you don't get promoted, you don't get whatever. And some people's supervisors are amazing and they go on to have great careers. If you get a supervisor that's like the first one, you end up leaving because it's just unbearable. So it's not right. We're in a system where, like, and the whistleblowing process is ridiculous as well. The university just basically rally round and say, oh no, he doesn't work here anymore, there's nothing to answer to, and then he's employed again under a different job title. And it's just, they try and cover it up. They don't just own it and say, yes, this happened, we're trying to put it right.
It's a form of suppression.
It is, it's so bad. And you know, I personally have been quite lucky, but I know many of my female amateur astronomer friends get so much unwanted, rude messages, and it really is just the horrible side of social media. I tend to use it as a write-only medium these days because it's the only way I can. People aren't rude to me directly very often, but I don't read the comments under any post I think is going to be inflammatory. I just can't do it.
So sad though.
It is, it really is. And it's like women join certain groups online and they think, yeah, let's help here. And it's just an old boys club who constantly exclude them and don't talk to them or involve them. And so they go off and set up their own club and then they're clicking with these other people. It's just like, I left nearly every Facebook group a couple of years ago and it's the best thing I ever did, honestly. I'm too old to deal with Facebook drama. I've just left all of it. If people want to see my pictures, they'll come to my website. If they don't, I don't care. Like, I do my astrophotography for me, that's all I care about. So I'm not earning a living off my photography. So if I was, I'd have to treat it differently. But yeah.
Do you think all the women that have been affected by this, is the hate mainly coming from men, or is it a mixture of both?
Can be both, actually. When Jocelyn Bell Burnell discovered pulsars, not a single person in the department, another woman, actually congratulated her. When she got engaged, the whole department were rallying around. Oh, this is amazing. When are you leaving? He's like, what do you mean leaving? Well, you're going to have to leave now if you're getting married. And she's like, no, I'm not. And nobody thought that it was important that they congratulate her for the pulsars thing. It's just. So there are women that think it's really bad when women are doing well in this field as well. So the bullying can come from that. I don't know whether it's from a place of jealousy. It's just that, just be kind. There are also disparities in too many women and not enough men in certain parts of academia as well. It's important that we make men feel that they're welcome there. It's about equality. Nobody should be favoured over somebody else. And humanities can't get males in the departments at all. It's all women. Junior school teachers, you hardly ever see male junior school teachers anymore for fear of accusations of misconduct. And, you know, it has to be a level playing field for everybody. And so, yeah, I have had some bitchiness from other women, but, you know, I tend to stay away from people like that anyway. So I don't really see a lot of it. But I think it does, with the guys, I think sometimes it comes from a place of insecurity that all these women come in and getting our jobs or whatever. But there's, you know, there's enough jobs for everybody. Calm down. It's yeah, I don't know where it comes from, because I don't have a hateful bone in my body, and I find it odd that anyone can be rude about anybody's, you know, there'll be somebody that I know who's got just excelled at something I have no interest in whatsoever, happy for them. Somebody I know that's been given an award that I will never be nominated for, I'm happy for them, I don't care. It's about outreach for me, it's about inspiring people, and that's what I do. And I don't do it to get awards or recognition. I do it because I want those girls in the classroom to think, oh, I can do that. And I think if more people have that mindset, it'd be a kinder place.
I think most of my cows are really quite upset to your face.
Oh
Yeah.
no, gosh.
You do on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always say that Facebook is the home of the expert with no expertise. Because whatever you do or say, there's always somebody with no expertise who become an expert on it and tell you how to do it and where you went wrong and everything. It's just.
My husband read an article that said, if you want to find out the answer to something on Facebook, ask the question and then log in under a different account and put a wrong answer under it. Then immediately everyone will pile on to correct the person that's got it wrong. But if somebody hasn't answered wrong, nobody will answer. So people like to, oh no, you've got that wrong, I'm better than you. But they're not interested in just telling you the answer by themselves. They only want to correct people. And it's bizarre that you have to have a sort of puppet account to get an answer to something on Facebook. It's just mad. The social media blows my mind, but it does have a lot of really positives as well. And some of my best friends in the entire world are through social media. So yeah, I have made it so my experience on social media is positive, but it's not like that for everybody.
And I'd sort of take it slightly lighter. If you were going to take a road trip and you had a time machine with you, which of the astronomers we've talked about tonight, the 3 other spaces in that car, what would you fill? Who would you bring into your car to drive across the States and have a good chinwag?
Caroline Herschel.
Yeah.
Margarita Hack, Caroline Shoemaker. But I'd like a 15-seat people carrier.
It's a Winnebago. Okay, with bus, yes.
I mean, I'd love Caroline to call me a blockhead, just because I think it's amazing that she ever called anyone a blockhead. I think it's awesome. She'd probably think I was one, but you know, they are all just such incredible women. And I wish I'd had more time with Caroline Shoemaker. Honestly, she was a joy, such a joy to talk to. And like, I hung up on Skype and just burst into tears. And Mark was like, "Did it not go well?" I was like, "It was amazing. She was so lovely." And then I couldn't speak for 20 minutes. My goodness sake, get a grip. But I would probably faint if I met Caroline Herschel, honestly. Yeah.
Well, you've seen her hair. Her hair. Yeah.
I had a moment as well,
Yeah.
as I knew I would. But yeah, they're all deserving of me spending time with them. They're all just, it's really hard to pick, isn't it? It's like picking your favorite child. I'd love to know how the Harvard computers just kept their motivation in those conditions. I'd like to talk to all of them for a bit.
I bet they really had a good laugh.
Yes, I think they did. From the photographs that were taken of them, I think they did look like they were having a good time.
Okay, should we call it there? It's no final questions. I'd like to say thank you again.
Thank you.